Good evening. My name is Maia Orejudos, and I'm here tonight to clear up a misconception. During the COVID-19 pandemic, kids all around the world were forced to adapt to alternative methods of education. If you were a student during this time, you might recall continuing your studies through online video calls or pre-recorded TV lessons, or maybe even radio lessons. But while you were learning at home, you were not homeschooling. Unfortunately, none of those situations could be considered an accurate depiction of what homeschooling is. I would know because I was homeschooled for the first 6 years of my education. And I've had the experience of public schooling, both remotely and in person in the years since. As a former homeschooler in public school, I've come to realize that a lot of people don't have a deep understanding of what the model is, even as it has been growing in popularity in the aftermath of the pandemic. So tonight, I want to try and fix that by telling you all about what homeschooling is really like. Because it's more than just learning at home. It's based on the idea that education is not one size fits all. And the aim of homeschooling is to allow students to maximize their learning by offering flexibility in all aspects of their education. I like to think of it as a practice that emphasizes the you in Ed-YOU-cation. Because when students emphasize the you in Ed-YOU-cation, they're better equipped to realize their own individual potential. So here's 3 advantages of homeschooling that I've personally seen the value of. 1 is the flexibility to learn at your own pace. The National Home Education Research Institute, or NHERI, found that homeschoolers tend to score up to 30% higher on standardized tests than their counterparts in traditional systems. Because when students are taught individually instead of within a group setting, their academic needs are noticed more, so they don't have to waste any time on their individual learning. When I was a homeschooler, I never had to worry about falling behind the rest of the class, because if I needed more time to understand a concept, my teacher, my mom, made sure that I had the time to fill in those gaps in my comprehension. Conversely, in the areas that came more naturally to me, I was able to accelerate because I didn't have to wait for the rest of the class to catch up. And this explains why homeschoolers are able to have such a high level of academic success. But another factor in that success is the valuable support system homeschoolers have in their parents, which leads me to a second blessing of homeschooling: a stronger relationship between students and their families. Naturally, homeschoolers spend a lot more time at home and with their families, and so their parents are able to have a greater influence on their overall personal development. Studies by the NHERI on social and emotional maturity in children show homeschoolers performing at a higher level than kids in traditional systems, which is another way that homeschooling emphasizes the you in Ed-YOU-cation. It allows students to learn in a way that aligns with their personal upbringing and culture. For example, part of the reason why my parents chose to homeschool me was because they wanted me to have an educational foundation built upon our faith. But the flexibility of homeschooling allows for families with a variety of beliefs to incorporate their values into their kids' education. So no, not all homeschoolers are hippies or white American Christians. Nowadays, a lot of parents are choosing to homeschool just because they want to spend more time with their kids. However, homeschoolers don't spend all of their time at home. According to the NHERI, 98% of homeschoolers participate in an average of 5 extracurriculars per week. Because they tend to learn faster and mature faster, they have the time and the self-management skills to pursue extracurricular interests that support their overall personal development, which is a third pro of homeschooling. Because emphasizing the you in Ed-YOU-cation isn't just an academic objective, it pertains to the whole individual. My little sister is still in homeschooling, and she enjoys exploring her interest in music through vocal lessons and piano lessons and guitar lessons and musical theater productions. And I have friends who homeschool, and they're really interested in things like coding and robotics and the visual arts, and so they get to take classes in those areas. And when I was homeschooled, I got to spend a lot of my time in competitive gymnastics, training up to 4 hours a day. Gymnastics was not just an important part of my childhood because it was a hobby for me. It was also a means of much needed socialization throughout the week with peers of my own age. So I wasn't a hermit just because I was homeschooled. And those are 3 of the benefits of homeschooling, which have all contributed to my academic and personal development. However, I recognize that my homeschooling experience is a privilege, and that's one of the major limitations to the model. It is a privilege. It requires a level of parental availability and financial stability that just, unfortunately, is not a reality for many families. And another limitation to homeschooling is that it just doesn't challenge students in the same way that public schooling does. I loved homeschooling because it made me feel comfortable as a student. But by the time I reached 6th grade, my parents saw that I had become too comfortable. And at that point in my education, they realized that in order to maximize my learning and my growth, I needed to be pushed outside of my comfort zone, which is why I was transitioned to public school. And although I was initially terrified of the transition, and although it was initially very challenging, I'm very glad to be here today because now I've gotten to experience the aspects of education that homeschooling doesn't have. One being a group environment. While the ability to learn at your own pace as a homeschooler is definitely an advantage, it can be difficult for students to stay motivated as they continue to progress. I think one of the reasons why I'm so motivated today as a student in the International Baccalaureate program is the influence that my peers have on my mentality. There's no way I would be able to have this positive, ambitious work ethic if it weren't for this environment of other positive, ambitious students that I have. Public schooling also taught me how to see the value in the process of learning and not just the result. I was used to academic success when I was homeschooled because homeschooling made it easy for me to have that. But being in an environment where I have less control and I'm less comfortable has forced me to adapt to academic challenges and embrace inevitable failure. For example, the biggest thing I learned in my chemistry class last year wasn't the chemistry concept. It was how to accept my lack of understanding and how to go to my teacher and ask for help and stick with the material even when I didn't care about the material. Although I don't remember like 98% of the chemistry that I learned that year, I wouldn't consider that class a waste of my time because it helped me develop academic resilience and academic humility, and those were things that I didn't really have when I was in homeschooling. So, in review, While the beauty of homeschooling is a level of flexibility in learning that encourages students to maximize their learning, homeschooling isn't perfect. And that's okay. After 6 years in homeschooling and almost 6 years in public school, I've realized that ultimately, the power of education is in the student, not the system. And that's why homeschooling aims to emphasize the you in Ed-YOU-cation. Because the more invested you are in the potential of your learning, the closer you are to finding your individual purpose. And when you find and fulfill that purpose, you will contribute to a more intellectually diverse and knowledgeable society. And then Ed-YOU-cation isn't just about you anymore. It's about all of us. Thank you so much.